Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Pitt County Board of Commissioners meeting for July 18th. If we could go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we are going to be doing roll and votes by hand this evening. Apparently the technology is not cooperating, so if everyone who is present could please raise their hands.
I'd like to move that Commissioner White be excused.
Second.
It has been moved and properly second. If we could all vote.
All in favor? That's what you said?
Yes, ma'am.
Now you gotta know I gotta hear it. Thank you.
All right, if we could stand for the invocation and the pledge, please.
Eternal God, we come first of all to thank you. We thank you for this day. And Lord, we ask that you bless this meeting. Help us to make the decision that will be proper and well to you. In thy holy name we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time, entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. If everyone could raise their hands, who is in support of the motion? Motion passes. Madam Manager, do we have any public addresses to the board this evening?
You have 3 signed up. First, is it Terry Little? And if the attorney would read the statement.
Yes, Pitt County welcomes comments on all matters of public concern. Please state your name and address prior to beginning your remarks. Pursuant to the board's rules of procedure, I will keep your time at 3 minutes per speaker. If you're speaking on behalf of a group that is present, please identify that group and I will extend your time for 5 minutes.
You may come forward to the podium.
That's Terry Little.
First off, good evening.
Good evening.
I am Terry Little, resident of Eastern Pitt County, all my life with my wife and 3 children. I am now a proud papa of 2 granddaughters, with 1 living in Pitt County. Paxton and Clark Neck area has a population of about 6,562 people, and track 9.1 and 9.2. I am very concerned about the lack of money being spent in this part of the county. Here's an idea to move this area forward into the 21st century. The resource center down in Paxton is not being used. My recommendation is that we try to create a sheriff's satellite office down there to help support the area down there in Paxton and Clark Neck area. Next is using the center as a pop-up clinic to serve the people of East Greenville to help reduce the transportation costs for the people down there. Our area is a very low income area down there, so we really need some help where we can get it from. Also had a social service use the area, the resource center, as a mental health service, maybe 2 or 3 days a week when you come down there. Also, the health department can use that as a vaccination site. You know, whatever we have, like, of course, the COVID still going on, and we can use for other activities that the health department can provide 2 or 3 days a week. Also, we can use that center to create a senior program once or twice a month to help the senior citizens down in the area, because right now they have nowhere to go at unless they go direct all the way into the city of Greenville. My next agenda is the recreation center. There's no recreation center on the north side of Pitt County. Our children need somewhere to go at to free up the time. Also, we can use that center to have a senior citizen activity at that same location. They can have a playground there and use that. Also, use that whole site for a satellite disaster center in case something happens. The people from Clark Neck, Paxton areas have somewhere to go at. Because where I live at, where my church live at, it's a low flooding zone. So we need somewhere to go in case something happens. Also, the last thing is broadband. Our broadband in that area, Pitt County, is very bad, very bad. Cell link come all the way up to Paxton School, and it's cut off. And our service now is CenturyLink, which is very poor service. So we really need the broadband. I know we got money from the Rescue Act, but we really need money to help broaden their broadband, improve the service down there. So also we can have church in that church service. Because sometimes our last streaming service go out because the service is so bad in that Pac total clock net area. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask Mr. Little, is that, the recreation at Pactola Elementary School, you all can't use that anymore?
No, that's a school property, and
But they don't allow you to use it?
No.
Because I know at one time they were using that as a recreation facility.
and it's like kind of hard to use because the gym is located right into the school, so it's not like a separate
Okay.
building
Thank-
standalone.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, I wasn't aware of that.
Okay, thank you.
Next on your list is Don Cavallini.
Greetings. Usually, when a group of residents approach you, the commissioners and the staff of Pitt County, we present our views regarding an item on the agenda or a particular aspect of our well-being that we want you to address. It may be how our tax money is being spent or something as specific as a request by a developer for a zoning change. However, tonight, I speak as the co-chair of the Pitt County Coalition Against Racism, and I'm accompanied by representatives of our relatively new organization, the North of the River Association. The reasons we are here is simply to make the commissioners aware that we're watching to see if any other attempt is made to put profits above the well-being of the residents of Pitt County. And the reason we say that is that this was done when some of the staff of the county, mostly related to the Eastern North Carolina Alliance, City Council, encouraged Compute North to come down here to do data mining for cryptocurrency. They perceived us to be vulnerable, and we proved them otherwise. Another reason why we're here is to question a requested zoning change, basically a zoning ordinance change amendment to reclassify a 16.5-acre tract of land off Ramshorn Road from rural agricultural to general commercial. So we just want to know more about that. And we realize that much of what happens in Washington, D.C. heavily impacts what resources we have to spend locally. Almost all of that money gets funneled through Raleigh before it ever gets to Pitt County, right? And we know that we're facing crushing inflation and the unfortunate likelihood of recession. We can disagree as to why our capitalist economy has us in this fix. It didn't start with the former presidents giving huge tax breaks to big corporations and the rich. It was going, and unfortunately it continues to get worse, regardless of what administration. So we're here to say that some of the items on the agenda we very much support. Adding Juneteenth as a paid holiday for county employees, very important. Making sure that sheriff's deputies or anybody that works for the county who happens to work a swing or a shift other than the normal working hours, that they get a 10% differential. That's only fair. They're not with their families. I worked a swing shift and I know what that's like. You know, the city of Greenville has it as a Juneteenth, and other agencies pay a differential. So I think both those things are very important, and I hope that you will vote for them. Okay, I'm also in favor of what the sheriff has asked, so thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Next, we have Stephen Hardy Braze.
He's giving me some advice. Good evening, I'm Stephen Hardy Braz from Farmville, North Carolina. Live at North Green Street. Usually I come here and telling you about some exciting cycling adventures coming through, or I'm asking about disability issues or what have you. Just tonight I want to come and say thank you. Thank you for addressing some of the lack of sidewalks coming to City Hall. I had a very productive meeting with your county manager, and I think we're going to move forward on a lot of things. While I wish we could wave a magic wand and cure and solve and fix things overnight, I am pleased to see that there's progress being made. And I just want to say I appreciate that on behalf of other people that have struggled for access and things like this. I also want to make sure you're all aware that we will be hosting this area right down the street here, the statewide annual, this will be the 11th annual Bike Walk Summit for transportation. And you're all invited. Everyone's open to everybody here, including we'll have Sheriff Paul Dance, so one of our speakers at the conference there, and talking about accessibility issues, talking about how we can make things a more walkable, bikeable area for the quality of life everybody, whether they're north, south, east, or west of the river. So I just want to share that word, and again, thank you, and I look forward to working with your manager and everyone else in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just one page.
Yes, may come forward. Brenda Harris.
I'm Brenda Harris, and I want to tell you that I'm not coming to complain. I'm coming to tell you that I'm proud of you. Many of those that I used to see have gone on. Many new faces I intend to get to know, because the greatest thing that we can do in a community is to learn to work together as one, because it does take a city. It takes a county. It takes a state in order to make things go better. But what I want to tell you especially is I was the one that came and said Kathy Booker needs to go, and God knows she did. But I want to tell you how good and how proud I am of Sam Crone and Lori English that just left to go to Kinston. And Melissa, that's taken her place, Hathaway, I think her last name is. Let me tell you something, guys. They are the 5th in the state on collections. Do you know how hard that is? Miss Booker foreclosed on 300 homes, and probably 30% were Afro-American, because I did the work. I'm so proud that government has determined to do things better. And then Ms. Gallagher, I would get her Employee of the Year 10 years ago, so I would applaud her today because she's smart, she's a good attorney. See, I've been around a while. I've seen the really bad stuff, and I see when it gets better, but I'm here to contribute. As the days go on, we'll be talking about issues that are north of the river. We're going to be talking about soils and development and land use and septic tanks. We're going to be talking about what we can do with neighbors, not to just progress people in money in their pockets, but you make sure that those homes that are put on the ground have septics that are going to last 30 years, or at least you think so. We're going to talk about infrastructure that doesn't exist, and we're going to talk about the 1999 flood and what happened north of the river. And we're going to talk about how we can do better. Is my time up? No? Okay. Well, I want to tell you one other thing. Not just am I proud of Sam and Lori and Melissa, I'm proud of a new atmosphere at the tax department, because people take leadership from the top down. And when you get a sweet spirit, I want you to know I like to go pay my taxes. And they say amen, and Sam says, Lordy Jesus, and we're all happy. But you can run government without stepping on toes, guys. You can run government by doing the very best you know every minute of the day. And you remember, there are laws that govern us, the Constitution. Then we're a political corporation, the state, and then we're political subdivisions. We'll be talking more.
Good to see you, Miss. Good to see you, Brenda.
Sure.
Okay. We will go down front for Employee of the Month and Employee Service Awards.
Harrison, a long time.
It is always my pleasure each month to recognize our Employee of the Month. If Tim Daniels would please come forward.
Oh, Tim.
Ooh.
Tim, come join I could say a few words about Tim. Congratulations, Tim Daniels. He was nominated and selected by the Employee of the Month Committee for being a dedicated employee. He's in the Buildings and Grounds Department, and he has been a great assistant in several ongoing buildings and grounds projects over the year. He is always willing to help others and has the potential and exhibits now that he is a leader, says the nominator. Mr. Daniels recently demonstrated his dedication to excellence when we had a water issue between animal services and the farmers market. And he worked with others to develop a solution that involved a French drain, and he implemented that. And he did so in a helpful way, and in a very competent way, and we're so appreciative of that. He's been a maintenance assistant with Buildings and Grounds for 28 years. And he says, I enjoy working with Pitt County because I like talking to people and helping them. He also enjoys working with his hands. And Tim's quote of choice was, always give your best in everything that you do. So we couldn't be more proud of Tim Daniels. He exemplifies what we like to see in Employee of the Month. And with that, I have to present to you, with the chairman, a certificate that reads, presented to Tim Daniels in recognition of your dedication and exemplary service to Pitt County government and the citizens we serve, and a $100 check. And if you'll get a picture, Mr. Chair, let's go in front of this table, and you stay in the middle, Tim, and I'll hide the cords.
3, 2, 1. One more. 3, 2, 1.
Good. Thank you. If Florida Hardy would come forward, we are ready to move to our service awards. So thank you to everyone who's present today as we honor employees who have 5, you want to get on this side, 5, 10, 15, 25, and 30 years of service. We don't have any 20-year recipients this year of service with Pitt County government. And a couple of things I wanted to say at the beginning. This is our first time doing this recognition in person since the pandemic began. So we're about 2 years since we've done this the last time. It is also the first time that we're doing this since the commissioners have gone to all-night meetings. These were typically done at 9 o'clock in the morning during the workday. It's a voluntary ceremony for those employees who are able to come out in the evening, and those who cannot be here or cannot attend will receive their recognition within their departments during their workday. So they'll still receive their certificate and recognition. Due to the time of tonight's meeting, summer vacations, and employee choice, we have 5 employees of 28 who I was thrilled replied that they would be here this evening. So I'll call those individuals up first to recognize them, and then recite the names of everyone else who achieved those milestones today. So if I call your name, please come forward. When you're called, we'll refrain from shaking hands with everyone as you come up. So with 5 years of service, if Sharon Tripp Haywood would come forward with the sheriff's office. And you'll have your certificate and pen. Do we want to get it? Since there's just 5 of you, Sheriff, do you want to do that again with all of us? Since there's just 5, we'll stop and take the time for pictures. We don't typically do that when we have a lot. Thank you. Next, with 10 years of service, is Travis Alden White present from the sheriff's office. He replied, but I did not see him come in. Okay. 25 years of service, Nicole Hull Wilkins. Human Resources. It's a big one. Have anyone to take care. And for those who want a picture afterwards, we're happy to do those or recreate them tomorrow. Also with 25 years of service, Chad Singleton with Animal Services. you're coming with a picture, come on back. And then our last and largest recognition today for 30 years of service with Department of Social Services is Chrissy Adams. Would you like a picture? Absolutely.
Worked hard for this.
30 years. Congratulations.
That's a long time, 30 years.
Thank you.
Every time I applied for another position, they said, "What's your ultimate goal?" I said, "To retire from Pitt County Department of Social Services." Now I get it.
And for those who couldn't be here with us, I'll call out your names. If you happen to be here in the audience and I call your name, please do come forward. With 5 years of service, Aisha Renee Bell with the Detention Center, Catherine Murphy Capizzi with the Sheriff's Office, Monica Paulette Daniels with Social Services, Travis Brandon Everett, Emergency Management, Crystal Richards Gauthier with Social Services, Shanita Harvey Gibson with Social Services, Erin Elizabeth Harris with Emergency Management, Brittany Marie Interdonato, Animal Services, Aisha Marguerite Jones, Social Services, Laquilia Ann Lewis, Public Health, Candace Michelle Manning, Social Services, Bridget Freeman Morris, Social Services, Joshua Glenn Parker, Pitt Soil and Water Conservation, Aisha Nicole Phillips, Social Services, and Tiffany Braswell Thigpen with Public Health. At 10 years, Nathan Neal Hollingsworth with the Sheriff's Office. 15 years, Robert L. Armstrong with the Sheriff's Office, Leonard Callier, Social Services, Shantae Carson, Social Services, Tammy Harris, Tax Administration, Daniel Hughes, Sheriff's Office, and Troy Martin, Sheriff's Office. At 25, Wanda Streeter with Public Health. So we sincerely appreciate all of the employees who have given their dedicated service to Pitt County and congratulate them on these milestones. We do have, Mr. Chairman, one other item that is not on your agenda for recognition. And for that, some may or may not know that this evening is Brian Barnett's last meeting with Pitt County government. He is our Deputy County Manager and Chief Financial Officer, AKA right arm. I have 7 of them on my senior leadership team. And we, under your authority, Mr. Chairman, you signed a letter of recognition for Mr. Barnett. And if Brian would come forward.
Are you surprised?
And Brian, this letter reads, "Dear Mr. Barnett, on behalf of the Pitt County Board of Commissioners, we commend you for your years of service and leadership through serving as the Deputy County Manager, Chief Financial Officer for Pitt County. We also commend you for the continued consecutive yearly awards and recognition of the popular annual financial report, the PAFR, the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting, the CAFR, and others throughout your tenure with Pitt County. We wish you the best as you embark upon a new season as County Manager of Davie County. Again, congratulations and best wishes from the Pitt County Board of Commissioners. We will remember you with heartfelt thoughts and memories." And if you'll present him with that.
Speech.
Do we have parting words?
Glad to see everybody come out tonight for my last meeting. Embark on this new adventure. I'm going to take a little bit of Pitt County with me. It's part of my letter. When I send out to everybody, Pitt County wants to be the leader in the state and best in the East, and I hope to make Davie a leader in the state and best in the West. But it's been a great time here. It's been an honor and a privilege. So I hope to do the same thing when I go out to Davie.
Terrific.
They'll be very lucky.
Yes, we will miss you, and we'll get one picture. Thank you so much. All right.
All right, if we could now move on to the public hearings.
Your first public hearing is for Prem K. Singlet. It's a rezoning request, Eric Gooby.
Thank you. This is the first of 5 public hearings we do have for you tonight. This is the only rezoning request, though. Request is by Prem K. Singlet to rezone 16.5 acres of his property. It's located on the northern side of US 264 East. This is just west of its intersection with Ramshorn Road, and the request is to go from rural agricultural to general commercial. You see the vicinity map, you see the approximate location of the site. It is between Greenville and Ramshorn Road on 264. The land use map designates the entire area as commercial. You see there's also some agricultural open natural resource along the rear of the property. That's primarily the floodplain area, but again, the land use plan does designate it as commercial. Existing land use is predominantly agricultural with a few residential properties around it. You'll see just to the east at Ramshorn Road, there is a large sand mine, which is what y'all heard last month, the Briley sand mine. Again, the land use plan designates it as commercial. This is intended for commercial uses, office and public institutional uses, light industrial and limited residential uses. The zoning map, you see this is rural agricultural. But y'all see there's also a couple of larger general commercial zone properties that are currently in the area. So the area that's being requested is pretty consistent with the size of those areas as well. General commercial district is intended to accommodate a range of retail, service, office, limited wholesale, and moderate density multifamily residential uses in areas that have access to major thoroughfares and the utilities that support that development. I also note that the property is located within the Highway Corridor Overlay District, so there are some additional screening and buffering requirements that go along with that when they develop the property. Staff does find that the request is consistent with the land use plan. The area is designated as commercial on the land use map, and the size is consistent with other general commercial zone properties. Staff also finds that the request is reasonable and in the public interest due to its location along the major thoroughfare, as well as the existing general commercial zone properties are in proximity to the site. Additionally, as I mentioned, it is in the Highway Corridor Overlay District, so they'll also be subject to additional screening and buffering. The Planning Board reviewed the request at its June 15th meeting. They voted unanimously to recommend approval of the request. And staff does recommend 2 motions tonight. First is to adopt the consistency statement. I won't read that whole thing, but it is in your packet tonight for your consideration. Then also the second motion would be to approve the request by Mr. Singlet to rezone the property from rural agricultural to general commercial. And with that, Mr. Chair, we'd like to open the public hearing.
The public hearing is now open. Do we have anyone?
Do not have anyone signed up to speak. We had Don Cavallini, whose name was on public addresses. If he would like to speak again for this hearing, he may, but I think it was, I'm not sure if that was intended. The same speaking rules apply at
Except speakers get 5 minutes to
5 minutes
speak.
per speaker.
So I stand not to speak for nor against, simply to say we appreciate that you're bringing this to us, and we're here to listen as to what the purposes are for the rezoning, and thank you.
Unless there's anyone else signed up, we will now close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve.
I was gonna offer the motion to approve, but I second his motion.
Unless there's any further discussion, it's been moved and properly second. We could all vote. In favor? Motion passes.
If I just clarify, is that for both motions? There were 2 motions?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr.
Commissioner
Chairman?
McLaughlin?
Both
Okay.
motions.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
We can now move on to amendments to the Pitt County Subdivision Ordinance. Mr. Rhodes.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. We do have 4 other public hearings concerning your development regulations tonight. All are amendments. The first one is the soil erosion and sedimentation control ordinance for the county. Just so you know, too, we administer this set of regulations for a number of municipalities within the county as well. So this change is not only for us, but through our interlocal agreements for those municipalities. This is a delegated authority from the state We received that quite a number of years ago, and the development community has asked that we retain this here locally. They prefer to have these types of plans route through our offices versus the state. There has been an update to the model ordinance that we are supposed to follow. That happened late last year. These are changes, there are a number of changes because this is the first time it's been updated in about 8 years. So tonight, we have a number of changes, including some grammatical and formatting issues, some changes, department names have changed, also some modifications to the submittal requirements, and just a number of other items that needed to be changed, including some definitions. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'm just going to hit some of the highlights. I'll be glad to go back to any of the others as you see fit. The definitions, a number of these have either been included or changed. There are exclusions for our soil erosion and sedimentation control regulations. And remember, this applies to development sites where there's at least 1 acre of disturbed area. So not on your half an acre lot or anything like that, but in these larger development sites, if a new subdivision, for example, is going in. But there are exclusions, such as for agricultural purposes. Those are handled elsewhere. There are also some exclusions related to wetlands. One of the big items that's always a concern with soil erosion and sedimentation control is the amount of time that a site is disturbed or left barren. So this section deals with the limited time of exposure. It's always very important to get that site vegetated as quickly as possible to limit any sedimentation leaving the site. Other things, as far as the plan review process, we are going more digital in nature, so limiting the number of plans that are, paper plans that are coming in, and also requiring digital submittals. Very important to know who exactly owns this property, because that person is the financially responsible party if something goes awry. So that documentation. We also acknowledge the fee schedule, and that's already, we're not changing that as part of this process. We're just acknowledging that there is a fee schedule associated with this. There are 3 ways that the plan can be acted upon: approved with conditions, which is typically what happens, and then disapproval or denial. A couple of other things: we will issue now a certificate of plan approval, and also inspections are very vital in this process, and any violations, there's a new process by which the state has dictated that we need to proceed with from here on out. Civil penalties, there are penalties that are required, and you'll hear us talk more about criminal penalties that have gone away now. But civil penalties, there are requirements if there are some egregious findings when we're out on site. With that, Mr. Chairman, these help us align with the state's model ordinance, and staff is recommending approval of these with an August 1st effective date. And with that, we request the public hearing to be open.
This time, the public hearing is open. Do we have anyone signed up to speak?
There's no one signed up to speak.
If no one would like to address that, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing and entertain any motions.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move for approval of the proposed amendments with an effective date of August the 1st. And adopt the replacement pages.
Unless there's any further discussion, it's been moved and properly second. All in favor? Motion passes. Mr. Rhodes, it looks like you're up again.
Yes, sir. The next one is the amendments to our flood damage prevention ordinance. And again, this is a vital part of our regulation program here in the county to help protect people. We have been participating in the National Flood Insurance Program since 1980. We have to have these regulations in place to allow our citizens to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. As you know, about a quarter of the county's jurisdiction is within the 100-year floodplain, so this is a very important regulation here. This also, as you may remember, we are involved with the community rating system. Because of our regulations and some of the improvements that we require as part of this, we are able to actually reduced flood insurance premiums by 10% here in the county. We're rated at a community rating system score of 8. That allows for that 10% reduction. Number of changes, again, we're following a model ordinance kind of from the federal level down through the state. And there are a number of items that I'll briefly hit on. Previously, we had allowed, as the federal government did allow, an exemption for a crossover duct on double-wide mobile homes. That is no longer exempted, and for us to stay in good standing with the community rating system, we now have to ensure that any crossover ducts, and I'll show you a diagram in a minute, that is in fact above the regulated flood level. There's also, I'll show you quickly, these, find the mouse. Previously, that duct work could go. Remember, we also have a 2-foot freeboard. That's an additional level of protection here in Pitt County. We've got the base flood elevation. At this level, we require a 2-foot further elevation above that. That allows for additional protection of homes and property. Previously, the duct work could be below the RFE, or the regulated flood protection elevation. Now it has to be above. So for these double-wide mobile home parks or double-wide mobile homes within some of the parks, they will be required to be elevated a bit higher. There are also construction requirements. There can be equipment below that level. However, it has to be flood-proof to a certain extent and meet certain requirements, or certified by an engineer to meet those requirements. Also, the substantial damage, that's a major issue, especially if we have repetitive flooding. This particular item requires, if there's been flooding within a certain time period, it cannot exceed a certain amount of that value for that particular structure. So that's very important, especially during some of these major flood events. With that, Mr. Chairman, again, this brings us in compliance with our model ordinance. The state has already reviewed this ordinance and has endorsed it. We're looking at also a new effective date for this of August the 1st. So with that, public hearing, please.
I'd like to ask a question.
Mr. Rhodes, I believe Commissioner Perkins.
I would like to ask the question, based on what you know that we're doing in the district on that side, do you see any problems of changes of what we want to happen progressively over there happening, or will it prevent it?
This very minimal changes as far as the regulations go, except for those double-wide mobile homes. So those are going to have to be elevated a bit higher if they have that crossover duct, and most do.
And the old ones, do they have to go back?
No, ma'am.
Okay, that was my question. I didn't. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. If I may, I'd like to approve.
We need to.
Oh, we ain't finished.
At this time, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing.
There's no one signed up to speak.
We can close the public hearing. Commissioner Perkins Williams?
Yes, I'd like to move that we approve this motion and the recommendation by the planning department.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor? Motion passes.
And then also the subdivision ordinance amendments. As you're probably aware, we are quite active still in the subdivision development activity. With that, we're getting into some of these more marginal areas, and off-site septic systems have sometimes been problematic, and we continue to tweak those regulations. So one of the first sections that we've amended deals with the utilities, and in particular these off-site septic system areas where you might build your home on one lot, and then across the field somewhere the better soils are up on a sand ridge, and that's the area where your septic system will be placed and has been permitted through environmental health. So with this, we've been working closely with our tax office and some other agencies, especially environmental health, to ensure that our regulations align closely with some of their concerns. With that, we are, number one, prohibiting off-site septic systems on other building lots. I don't need my system on someone else's lot. That, in some respects, they may be responsible for that. Off-site septic systems are considered special use on a special use lot, and they must be labeled as non-buildable. Again, no new structures allowed on there. Eric's going to come up in a minute to show you how our zoning ordinance and our subdivision ordinance are going to align with these changes. Prohibits structures on lots designed expressly for septic, so those will not be allowed anymore. And we treat this as infrastructure to some extent. If we've got multiple off-site septic system areas, we're going to require these trenches and these pipes to be laid before the final plat is approved. So that's all part of the utility work. Other things include streets. We are trying to interconnect streets best we can. There are some exceptions when that can't be done. One is when there's a conservation easement available that's just adjacent to the property. And in turn, we're making sure that it's designated by a third party instead of someone that might be developing the land itself. So just keeping everything in check there. The minimum width, we're looking at some multifamily development in some of these municipalities where we're administering these regulations. And in turn, the minimum width for some of these multifamily developments, we are changing that. The park, recreation, and open space, that was a requirement the board put in place not long ago, and we're just making sure that there's direct access to that from one of these state or privately maintained roadways. I mentioned earlier about criminal penalties. The legislation has changed on that. That's now to be removed from our development regulations, so in turn we are removing that section of our ordinance. And that, in a nutshell, Mr. Chairman, is our amendments for tonight for the subdivision ordinance.
Thank you. At this time, we'll open the public hearing.
There's no one signed up to speak?
I have a question.
Oh. Okay, no one signed up. Do you want to allow from the audience?
Ma'am.
They come forward.
Just to remind you, Pitt County welcomes all comments on this proposed subdivision amendment. Please state your name and address prior to speaking. Each speaker is allotted up to 5 minutes to speak.
Brenda Harris. My address is 1766 Stokes Elementary School Road, Stokes. The reason that I'm speaking on subdivision is because it's what I know very well. I've worked across the state in many counties. What I've learned is that although however good your regulations are, if there is exceptions, then you break the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Americans with Disabilities Act. You break the reason that you get federal money, which is Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, the spending clause. So what I would say is I respect James Rhodes' opinion very much. But when you're looking at your ordinances and we're talking about septic, I could write a book on one. It happens to be on my farm, and it happens to be in that north of the river, Stokes. And some years back, it was illegally cut out by Kathy Booker that didn't understand that if a bank had loaned money, a trustee deed could never cut it out because a deed of trust can't reform. But what you have to understand, guys, is how you implement these organizations or functions is whether or not you're going to get federal money. So we're going to be talking about that particular site, which is my farm, but we're also going to be talking about the north of the river because septic issues are an issue. And then your foreclosures are very high today. You're going to have to make sure that banks go according to what their regulations have to be or file a lender's title claim. That's how they collect. If you want better government, you're going to have to understand the weight of laws. And again, it's the Constitution first. North Carolina cannot make a law that the federal government isn't in compliance with because we have to observe the rights against discrimination and disability and everything else. But when we come down to the political subdivision, we have to understand what those regulations impact. If they're impacting government and local developers to be able to spend money and to collect money and sell their farms at the highest dollar, but yet those homeowners that buy those individual lots are later harmed because what was approved, then we have to understand that government's going to carry that responsibility, because you are not only the functioning body that's been designated by the state, but you also are the people that have volunteered and said, I'll do it right. And that's what we want you to do. And if you don't know, you talk to people that know. James knows a lot, but I guarantee you Brenda Harris not only knows what I'm talking about, but I don't step to the plate unless I can prove it, because evidence is heavier than somebody's opinion. So as you talk about soil and you talk about things, you ride down 903 and you look at a castle on the left. It's 9,600 square feet. 10 years ago, it couldn't get a septic. Now it's got 2, and it's clay soil. Then you go on down and you'll see 2 double wides, beautiful little places that look like they might be in a swamp. And so you make sure that as James tweaks these regulations, that you tweak the responsibility of staff or anyone or a bank that does it wrong, and we'll walk in harmony, because unless 2 agree, we can't walk together. I thank you.
Anyone else signed up?
No one has signed up to speak.
We will close the public hearing and entertain any motions at this point.
I was going to ask the question.
And I'd like to.
As it, I had to wait for her first, right? Ms. Rose, in view of the fact that we have, I've shared with you those issues that I received relating to septic problems in subdivisions and mobile homes and that sort of thing. Will any of these changes or stuff affect improvement of what we've been facing repeated time and time again with septic services?
Well, it will help address new development through these subdivision regulations to ensure the best soils are used for the septic systems. So yes, future development, I say this will certainly impact.
And it won't address those that exist currently for what has happened, and nothing, can anything be done about it?
Well, again, that's an environmental health regulation. If there is a malfunctioning septic system, that's outside of the subdivision regulations. That's a health issue.
And a health issue. So you would need an environmental health person to look at that particular system, is that correct?
They would have the authority
Thank
on
you.
something like
That's
that.
all I want to know. Thank you.
Commissioner Colson?
James, the section that had to do with the septic system and the off-site septic systems and repair fields, you know my feelings about this very well because we talked about it in a couple of the neighborhoods where they've got these things. I think it's poorly conceived. The septic drain fields repair, how wide a line was it? It was originally 10 feet. Didn't it get increased to 25 feet or what? What is it now?
Still 10 foot.
Okay.
You're talking about the
I'm talking about
minimum lot width to the septic system area?
Yes.
Yes.
10 feet. Okay. How many can be parallel to each other?
There
We've had
was not
some
a-
in the past that have been like 6 or 8.
Not a limit.
Don't you see a problem with that? How somebody finds something there without going on somebody else's property?
Well, ideally, and again, depending on the configuration, there are some opportunities to have those in the same trench, depending on the configuration of the parent parcel and some other things. So it is problematic. Again, we're working along with the environmental health regulations where they, if there is a suitable area, they can permit that. We're trying to use that within our subdivision regulations to make sure that we're in concert.
Well, my problem is this. No real estate agent is going to convey that information to a buyer of one of these so-called, with these properties. It is a time bomb. It's going to be very expensive in the future for somebody to repair their fields. The fact that it's a forced system, it's subject to repairs. There's no minimum length, maximum length either stated. I've seen some in the past have been 675 feet long. As I said before, this is a very, very poorly conceived notion, and the environmental health can say all they want. They're not going to be the ones stepping up, paying the bills for the people, and it will not be disclosed at closing or before closing to customers where they have a real understanding as to what's going to hit them. It's kind of like one of the private roads. They buy a house and they're on a private road and they find out, oops, I got to pay for this road to get repaired. So I'm just explaining this because I'm going to vote against it. I think all the rest of it was fine, but I just wish that such things as this would not be brought forward as a tenable way of making lots, I'm going to say, sellable. None of the lots that we talked about in the past out there, in 903 in that area, none of them should be built on until there's sewer there. None of them.
Until what?
Sewer.
Okay.
And just to put another level out there, it's not just environmental health. Again, some of these more marginal areas, there are engineers that can now certify these systems, and in turn, they're going to have to at least design them according to the subdivision.
But they're not going to
regulations.
be the ones, James, that are going to have to pay when it fails. And when they go out there and they miss the line because it's only 10 feet wide, and they dig up somebody else's by mistake, these things are going to happen. It's not a case of will they, it's a case of when. It's going to happen. It's a bad, bad policy. Anyway,
Tom, can I ask you something?
what?
As an engineer, is there any way that it can be corrected so the property can be developed?
The problem is, they go out there and they look at the soil and they say, okay, this soil is capable of supporting a septic system in a repair field. And they might have a septic system on their main property close to their house, but the repair field can be 675 or more feet away. In order to be, in order to get to that, you've got to have a forced main. Now, who's going to pay for that at that time? Is it already in place when they build it? No, it's not. So when they have a failure on their main system, they're going to have to fork over a sizable amount of money to be able to put the line in to be able to get to the repair field. Most systems, they have a parallel system right next to your lines. You may have 2 or 3 lines coming out of a house or out of the distribution box, but they also have an area that if your system fails, to where you can go to it. Otherwise, you have to dig it all up and redo the whole system, and that's very expensive. So, I know you're going along with what the powers that be say, but I'm telling you, yes, they could do that. I'm a civil engineer. I majored in road construction and bridge construction, but I am a little bit familiar with this and soil. It's a bad plan. That's all I got to say.
Is a notice of known information, will that help the situation in new? If I buy it and not know it, then it's a problem, but if I buy it and I know it, then that's my problem, so
It
is
is
a notice?
caveat emptor. Caveat emptor. Let the buyer beware.
Oh, okay, that's.
But the buyer won't beware because they won't have this explained to them
That's,
at closing. It will not be disclosed at closing or before. All they're doing is interested in selling a piece of property.
So is it legal for us to have a caveat up in the two?
Commissioner Amendment?
James, are plats recorded when these plans are developed? So presumably, when this site is developed, there'll be a site map, and presumably, the plat for that development would be recorded.
You're exactly right. Yes, all these final plats that are approved are recorded with the Register of Deeds office, and that's what the deeds are drawn from.
Right, so, okay. So presumably, a buyer would have access to that public record through their title deed search through that particular parcel when they would to go to purchase. So they could see, through good due diligence, could see what the septic plan was for that site prior to closing.
Correct.
Okay.
Would the buyer have to ask somebody to look for it?
Again, closing attorneys and our county attorney might want to speak into this, but typically at a closing, especially for that first time that one's being deeded off a new subdivision plan, there would be full disclosure, all that information, part of the deed, especially if we're talking about these off-site areas, that is part of the deed description. As we've talked with the tax office, one lot where the home is built is not a complete lot if it isn't accompanied by this off-site area where the septic system goes. It's a package deal. So that's part of the deed, and it should be written in there.
Okay, that's what I wanted, that buyer is aware of stuff. Thank you very much.
Unless there's no further discussion, entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Motion. Second.
What was the motion? To approve? Okay, and the second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor? Motion passes.
Thank you.
So we have the proposed text amendments to the Pitt County zoning ordinance. Mr. Gooby and Mr. Smith.
Mr. Chair, if I could begin before Eric gets started, just to remind the board, this amendment that Eric's getting ready to discuss in detail with you is something that I kind of started, if you will, in March. And at bottom, I recommend these changes to you. I think it's a good program. What it does is it eliminates special use permits that come to this board for consideration, takes away the quasi-judicial requirements that are imposed on those, and resulting, it does away with the heightened legal liability that those types of hearings bring. And this would change it to a legislative process where this board gets to use the most discretion that you could possibly have and lowers your legal liability. I don't want to oversell the program. It's not foolproof or fault without some faults, but if you compare the two structures together, in my view, as your legal advisor, this one's much more favorable to the current scheme. So.
Thank you. So as Jordan alluded to, this is it's primarily to change special use permits, the Class 1 special use permits, to conditional zoning districts. We also have a handful of other amendments that we're proposing that I'll go through as I go through the presentation, but again, the bulk of this is for that purpose. So as you remember, as you recall from past meetings, special use permits do require evidentiary hearings. They have to follow certain quasi-judicial procedures that are fairly strict. Witnesses have to be under oath. The purpose is to gather facts, no ex parte communication, decisions. You have less discretion on your decision making, and there's more, as Jordan alluded to, there's more legal liability because those decisions can then be appealed to Superior Court. The amendments would change it to a conditional zoning district, which is a legislative process. So it's more akin to your rezoning process than it is to a special use permit process. This is currently allowed by the zoning ordinance. As you're aware, you've had conditional zoning districts come before you. It's allowed on a voluntary basis, but these handful of uses that are now currently special uses, it will be required for those in those districts where it's prescribed. So again, it follows the same procedure as a conventional rezoning. it adds another step to it. So because of that procedure, the planning board will then also have to review and make a recommendation on these requests. So there is a little bit additional layer of scrutiny on these items. There's no restrictions on ex parte communication, and again, you have broader discretion in terms of making your decisions. And there is that lower legal liability, or less potential for that legal liability. There are still some potential for spot zoning challenges, but we haven't run into any of those with our conventional rezoning, so I don't really anticipate that we would run into many of those in this process either. So there are currently 18 uses that are designated as a Class 1 special use permit. If you remember back when we amended the ordinance, did the big rewrite to come into compliance with Chapter 160D, we split our special use permits. We have Class 1 that goes to this board, and we have Class 2 that goes to the Board of Adjustment. And so the Class 1s are the ones we are solely talking about. Those ones that go to the Board of Adjustment, the only thing we'll be changing on those is the name. So Class 1 special use permits, instead of being referred to as an S1 in our table, they'll be referred to as a CD. And again, those will be heard by not only this board, but also the planning board. And those Class 2 special use permits, again, the major change for that is we're just going to change those back to special use permits. The list will remain the same, and those procedures will still remain the same. The Board of Adjustment will still have to follow those quasi-judicial procedures. I'll go through each section. I'll just kind of hit a few of the high points. You'll see primarily it's removing the language regarding those Class 1 and Class 2 special use permits. So in Section 3, we'll be adding some language regarding conditional zoning districts. Also clarifying some terms regarding the permit issuing or the approval authority. Currently there's some language about permit issuing board. Back when it was this board, the Board of Adjustment, that was kind of a distinction. Now the Board of Adjustment is really the only board that's going to issue a permit. So we're going to change it to permit issuing authority, because staff is also a permit issuing authority. And so it kind of gives us some of the same procedural abilities as what is for the Board of Adjustment. Then also clarifying the procedures for modifying conditional zoning district. Just an example of what I was referring to, the permit issuing board, you see we changed to authority, and also kind of clarifying the Board of Adjustment a little bit more and taking out the Board of Commissioners when referring to some of these special use permits. Under our table of permitted uses, again, removing that Class 1 and Class 2 language, then also amending some uses. Again, those ones that are listed as S1, the Class 1 special use permits, those will now be CD. Those that are S2s or special use permits, those will be just S for special use permit. We do have some uses that are currently shown as a Z, which means it's permitted by right. It doesn't have to meet any additional standards or have any hearings or anything. But some of these uses have standards in the ordinance, and so we're proposing to kind of bump those up another level, particularly sand pits. Those will be allowed to development standards in GI. Currently, if it's permitted by right, it doesn't have to meet our setback requirements for the excavation area or some of these other requirements that we have for sand mines. Sewage and water treatment plants, will make those CD in the GC and HC districts, and then allow development standards in our industrial districts. Then we'll also be adding some references below the table, mainly just so people don't have to look through the ordinance when they're looking at it to see what these codes mean. So again, this just kind of shows you an illustration of what we're referring to. Section 6, this goes along with the subdivision ordinance that James just referred to, adding off-site septic systems under our list of special purpose lots. And what these are lots that are for certain uses like an off-site septic system or a mailbox kiosk, utility uses like a pump station or a water tower. They're allowed to be approved, and they don't have to meet minimum lot size requirements for that district. So you don't need a half-acre lot for a small pump station. They will have to be approved in accordance with environmental health and the subdivision ordinance. Then Section 8 for development standards. The main thing is with manufactured homes in the R40 district, currently we require those to have a masonry underpinning. State law has changed that says that if you own the home but you are leasing the land, we can no longer require the masonry underpinning underneath it. So we're making those changes to reflect that, to be in compliance with the state law. Under enforcement, as James mentioned previously, we can no longer enforce our zoning ordinance with criminal penalties, so we're removing that. Under Section 14, we're clarifying some of the procedures for conditional zoning districts, also amending the time limit to establish a conditional zoning district. We've kind of gone back and forth over the last couple of years. It used to be 2 years, then we reduced it to 6 months. Now we're proposing to increase it to 1 year, so that makes it more consistent with our special use permits. Looking to amend some definitions just to clarify those, as well as our appendices, the flow charts, and the dates and reference numbers. The board reviewed this amendment request at its June meeting, recommended approval. And so staff does recommend 2 motions again. Because this is a zoning amendment, it does have to have a consistency statement approved as well. So that the consistency statement is there on the screen and in your packet. And the second motion is to approve the amendments with an effective date of August 1st. With that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to open the public hearing.
At this time, the public hearing is open,
If no one signed up to speak.
and we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Unless there's any further discussion.
I had one question. Yeah, could you just clarify, I think I'm looking at number 8, where it says clarify where development standards are required for that long list. Are there places where they wouldn't be required in that list?
There are some uses where they are allowed as a conditional district in one district, but they may be permitted with development standards in another.
Okay.
So under that section, we've just included they're required as a conditional zoning district in this district and not in the other.
Okay,
That's
thank
all.
you. Thank you.
Sir.
This time, entertaining any motions.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Good vote, please. All in favor? Motion passes.
I'm not
Thank
quite
you, Mr.
sure.
Do you want to call for opposed?
I vote against it,
And I believe Commissioner Perkins-Williams was opposed.
because there was some clarification that I did not quite understand.
Ms. Andrews?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners.
Good evening.
On June 16th, the governor announced an NC Commerce Building Reuse Grant award of $75,000 to Pitt County in support of Project Down East. This was in consideration of an investment of $1 million and the creation of 11 new jobs in Pitt County with an average salary of approximately $56,000. No county match is required, however, we do need acceptance of the grant by this board and a resolution to move forward with the allocation. We also asked for authorization to serve as applicant for 2 additional grants to support Project Down East. An NC Commerce Industrial Development Fund grant for $100,000 and a Golden Leaf Foundation grant for $100,000 for a total of $200,000 for both grants. The grants are needed to expand wastewater infrastructure in northern Pitt County near PGB Airport. This public infrastructure enhancement will accommodate the expansion of Project Down East as well as future growth in that area. This could potentially create new jobs and increase tax base in addition to Project Down East's expansion. And we respectfully ask for a motion to approve by resolution applications for each of these 2 grants and the acceptance of the NC Commerce Building Reuse Grant Award, as well as authorization for each grant to be managed by the Pitt County Economic Development Department.
And this public hearing would be for all 3 matters.
Yes.
If you'll open.
At this time, we'll open the public hearing,
If no one signed up to speak.
and we will close the public hearing.
I had one question to come to me.
Yes, ma'am.
Will this impact removing current permanent residents?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
I was trying to phrase it just right for what I was in. Will this have upsetting residents that?
No. This is
I just
simply-
wanted to
yes.
make sure that I asked that question.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Commissioner?
Move to approve.
Second. It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor? Motion passes. We can now move on to items for report. Dr. Silverman.
Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, Commissioners. Nice to see you all again. Want to take some time to review a couple of public health issues for you this evening. Was asked to talk about COVID numbers in Pitt County. I know there's a lot of interest still in the press about this. This data is now being reported weekly, and generally I get my reports on Tuesday, so that's why you'll see dates from last week. This is from the ECU Health Tuesday report for July 12th of this year. At that time, there were 113 individuals in the hospital system. This is across all 9 Vidant or ECU Health hospitals. There were 11 in the ICU and 7 of those on ventilators. I think when you look at this curve, in spite of the rising hospitalizations, you can see how flat that ICU curve is, and that's a good thing. And again, showing that on average, the virus is probably less harmful to us than it had been with earlier variants. This is the sequencing table, very complex table. I'll draw your attention to the blue area at the tail end or the right side of the map. That is BA4 and BA5, the variants you've been hearing about in the news. And when we look at those on a number basis, when we looked at this at the end of June, BA2, BA4, and BA5 were all relatively equally distributed. We have, as has the world and the rest of the nation, we have seen BA5 pull into the lead now. As you can see on the page here, about 46.7% of the sequence samples. BA4 is falling. BA2 is falling. There's also one that we have not detected here in Eastern North Carolina called BA2.75. There have only been about 11 sequence samples in the nation. That's more relevant across the world. I believe in India had the largest number of those cases. When we look at our county data, this is our epidemic curve, again shown by race and ethnicity. This is all the first variant, or alpha, a little bit of a spring wave that year. This is delta through the fall of 2021, peaking around September 11th of 2021. We had fallen, and this was the Omicron surge of January. And then you can see we came down to almost nothing, and we started to creep up. This is BA4 and 5, and we've been kind of riding our summer plateau. We had started down, we went back up. On the week-to-week that I get, and this is from the NC COVID report that I get again pretty much every Tuesday, we were down for the last 3 weeks slightly in reported samples. So I think that's good news. When you look at the breakdown of this, there's a lot of other. Those are usually our younger folks who identify as other on the race and ethnicity. The slate blue or sort of purplish, light purple color here are whites. African Americans have been a low but fairly consistent number of the cases for the last several weeks. So relatively flat curve in African Americans, which is good news. This is the same curve by age, and as throughout the pandemic, the red area are the young adult workers, 25 to 49-year-old individuals who have borne the brunt of the cases based on age. And testing is always a concern. We've had a relatively consistent volume of tests performed in the county, around 2,500 tests per week. That does not include home testing, and we know that there's a great deal of home testing going on now. In spite of that relatively constant number of tests, we have seen our percent positivity climb. That may reflect that people are self-selecting. They go get tested when they think they're sick. So there may be some selection bias in that. Wanted to show you this, the state epi curve and the state death curve. I think there's some good news in this. Again, when you look at this, you know, this is all the first variant or alpha. This is the Delta wave of 2021. This is the Omicron wave of early 2022. And you can see we rose, and we're kind of riding the summer plateau now of cases of Omicron across the state. When you look at the death curve, our deaths kind of match those. These are all the alpha deaths, first variant deaths. These are Delta deaths. These are the Omicron deaths. They fell off with the drop in Omicron, and our death levels really stayed pretty flat. So again, suggesting that the virus has become, on average, less harmful to individuals. The other caveat with that is that unfortunately the virus is also unpredictable in the individual host, and that it still does make some individuals very, very ill. That's important to recognize. But on average, the virus does seem to be becoming less pathogenic or less harmful to us as a whole. Wanted to show you our vaccine data. This again is reported weekly, so they update this on Wednesdays on the state dashboard. We've had about 104,000, just under 104,000 individuals in the county receive at least one dose, or 57% of Pitt County residents. We've had 97,000 564 individuals complete their primary vaccine series. That's about 54% of the county. And we've had 49,456 individuals receive at least one booster or additional dose. That's low. That's about 27%. We could do better in our boosters. It's not that it's not available. It's just that folks aren't coming out for them. So our uptake remains low with the vaccine. Wanted to take a minute and just brief you about monkeypox. I'm sure you've heard a lot about monkeypox in the news recently. Monkeypox is part of a group of viruses we call the orthopox viruses. These are large double-stranded DNA viruses. They tend to be somewhat species-specific, although sometimes they cross species boundaries. Smallpox or variola, most of us in this room are mature enough to have gotten a smallpox vaccination when we were kids, was the human pox virus. Chickenpox is not a orthopox virus. It is actually a herpes virus, part of the herpes family. Monkeypox in the wild is generally a disease of small mammals. It is native to the African continent, and generally there's transmission from animals to humans there. And once in a human, there is some limited to human-to-human transmission possible, generally by direct contact with the pox lesions or the rash of the disease. Monkeypox was last a concern in the U.S. in the early 2000s when it was introduced into the U.S. by exotic pets. These were African ground squirrels, or sort of a prairie dog type animal. The current global outbreak is disproportionately affecting men who have sex with men, or the gay, bisexual, and male transgender community. Spread, again, is mostly by direct skin contact. The infection is not, and I stress is not, as transmissible as COVID-19 or other respiratory viruses. A vaccine is available for both pre- and post-exposure prophylaxis, so if you are a contact of a case, we can vaccinate you within a certain time period after that exposure and hopefully prevent or at least reduce the severity of the disease in the individual. The health department here in Pitt County has agreed to serve as a regional hub for this vaccine. We've received 2 shipments of vaccine totaling about 260 doses or 130 courses of vaccine, and that is for all of Eastern North Carolina. We will be sharing some of that with the ECU HIV program for exposure prophylaxis there, but we are the regional hub for that vaccine in Eastern North Carolina. The vaccine is known as Jynneos or Jynneos. It was FDA approved for the prevention of smallpox and monkeypox. It's been around since 2010 or 2012. Received its approval around 2015 or 2016. It's given as a 2-dose primary series, day 0 and day 28, so about 4 weeks apart between the 2 doses. It's injected under the skin like other vaccinations, so more typical vaccination, not given with the scarification method that the traditional smallpox vaccine was given with. There's no skin lesion. It cannot be spread around your own body or spread to other people from that injection. Has a good an excellent side effect profile. There's a limited quantity on hand in the Strategic National Stockpile. That's why we've received a small amount and have been given guidance as to who can receive that, and basically you have to be a contact of the case. The manufacturer is working to increase production, and the state has told us that production will be increased drastically in the next several weeks. And at some point it will likely become part of our routine vaccinations in our sexual health clinics for individuals who would be at risk to contract this disease through the behaviors they engage in. And that's my report.
Thank
I
you.
have a question. I guess this is my day for full questions, Dr. Souvenir. But I'm interested in numbers. I do know that in the statistical classes that I had, you could skew one way up or down. And I'd like to know, are there any numbers in Pitt County as relates to the new viruses?
That's that picture I showed you, Commissioner.
They were pretty graphs up there, but if they didn't have numbers, I wouldn't know. But you had one that had numbers. Was those the actual numbers?
That's for the region, yes. That's ECU Health collects samples throughout Eastern North Carolina, and then those numbers are sequenced.
I think it was a little before that.
So yeah, that's the graph, the graphic view of sequencing across the pandemic, Commissioner. And then for the last 3 weeks.
Those numbers at the top are the actual numbers.
Yes, that's the
Okay,
actual numbers.
I just want to make sure.
Yep. numbers of samples that were sequenced that week. And it does vary week to week because not every sample that's collected is suitable for sequencing, so.
Is there a way we can look at the total as it adds up rather than week per week?
Total number of tests or?
The total number of cases.
Cases, yeah, that's on the, I didn't put the summary for the county. I thought the trend was more important. In the county, we're around 54,000 known infections, 54,000 positive test results, not deduplicated, so we didn't take out reinfections in that.
54,000 for COVID-19?
For COVID-19 infections, yes.
Okay, and the other viruses?
That would include all subtypes, Commissioner.
Also, okay.
Yeah, that's not 54,000.
I'm trying to
from start
be
to
clear
where
with
we
what
are
I'm looking
now, when I looked at that last week, I think we were 54,000 and change as a total number of positive test results or cases counted in Pitt County.
And that's not monkeypox and this other thing?
That's COVID. Monkeypox, there's about 11 cases in the state right now, across all of North Carolina. In Pitt County, we've had a couple of individuals tested. We have one case that we are highly suspicious of that we believe will be a case, but we have not confirmed that yet.
Whereas national news share a lot of information, and when people are asking, I think that's what that brought all of that about.
Mm-hmm.
I hear discussions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Hunt.
Dr. Silvernail, I think we still need to be putting, it looks like from what you reported, that we still need to be putting effort on that booster, on the boosters, because that percentage is very low, 27%. That's very low. So we can't give up on encouraging people to get the boosters.
No, we have not given up, Commissioner. The state has a big campaign for the summer, encouraging folks to get their boosters. Every time I get to talk to somebody about this, I encourage them to get their boosters. But as I said, the uptake from the community has been very light in terms of boosters.
It is widely available.
Widely available. We have ample vaccine. All of the chain pharmacies pretty much have vaccine and are doing it. Even some of the smaller non-chain pharmacies are vaccinating as well. And many private offices now are vaccinating.
Well,
Excuse me,
if you have the numbers, like 27% doesn't say very much, but the actual numbers says a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Silverman.
That's our numbers for the county as of the last state update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Silvernail, thank you for your report, but my concern is that in reading the papers and listening to the news, Pitt County is ranked among the highest in the state of North Carolina for this Omicron virus, and it's more progressive here because of the spread. Now, I'm concerned about the citizens of Pitt County and the safety of these citizens. I'm not, advocating anything in particular, but what would it take to return back to wearing masks to deal with this problem? Because it hurts me to hear that Pitt County is among the highest in the state of North Carolina about this. So what would you say to that?
Yeah, the state has deferred to CDC numbers on this, Commissioner. I don't like the CDC metric for this. It's a combined metric that takes in cases, hospitalizations, vaccine rates, and it's almost impossible to be anything other than high when you look at how the CDC calculates that matrix. You would probably have to have less than 6 cases a week for many counties to not be in the orange, which is very, very low. We're probably somewhere in the 4 to 5 cases per 1,000 right now across the county, which if you look at the CDC, they talk everything in hundreds of thousands. So that's 400 to 500 cases per 100,000 individuals. I think that's harder for the typical person to understand. So at the local level, I've always talked about cases per thousand. It's the same ratio. But we're in that 4 to 5 cases per thousand range here in the county, which to me is a moderate degree. Looking at it, at times when we were very, very busy with COVID, we were, 10, 12 cases or more. I think at the height of Omicron, where we had 5,000 cases in a week, that was like 30-some cases per thousand in the county. Masking, I think that there's little appetite in the public right now for masking. And I would be hard-pressed to encourage that. I think there's been so much negative press for masking, it would be hard to go back and impose a mask mandate on the residents of the county at this point. I think they would quite frankly, most of them would ignore it.
I'm not much for masking, but I like to be free to put it on when I feel like I ought to put it on. And that's why I think as long as we can reach that, it makes a difference. But numbers, is the one that tell people things. Percentages, I know, can be skewed. And when you start talking about statistics, that's what I look at. I just want you to know, I can read numbers, but I can't read the percentages because of the skewed mechanism that's in statistic and relativity. That's what I want you to know. Thank you so very much. I appreciate your patience with me.
Thank you, Dr.
You're
Silvernail.
welcome, Commissioner. You're welcome,
Mr. Attorney?
Yes, I was asked to give a legislative update to the board. The biggest item of note is the General Assembly on July 1 passed a budget modification. That was signed by the governor on July 11th. The General Assembly has left town until the end of this month, and the plan is to reconvene once a month to the end of the calendar year. Whether or not they'll conduct any major business will yet to be seen. The other item to mention, last time you were given an update in May, there was mention to a bill filed by Representative Farkas, House Bill 1048, which would have provided funding for the Pitt Greenville passenger rail study and would require the county and the city to contribute towards that funding. Good news item is that goal was essentially accomplished, but outside the legislative process, NCDOT is now funding that study in its entirety, and the county and the city aren't expected to contribute in any way. And the other item just to mention, even though the General Assembly just kind of ended their session, now's the time for us to be preparing for their next session. They'll be reconvening in January 2023 for the first year of the new biennium. And with that, the county typically adopts a legislative goals agenda prior to the start of that. We're in the midst of trying to formulate that internally amongst staff. I think your Friday packet that went out last week encouraged commissioners, if you have goals or proposals, please contact me and we can get that in a form. We're anticipating bringing your legislative agendas goal item to you at your second meeting in August. And with that, we'll be participating in the association's legislative goals process as well. But that concludes my report, unless there's any questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Cream?
Good evening, Chairman Fitzpatrick, Commissioners, Manager Gallagher. It's good to be with y'all tonight. Tonight I bring you the June 2022 tax collection report. Pitt County fiscal year to date, July 1, 2021 through June 30th, 2022, the combined collection rate for real and personal property was 99.42%. The combined rate 1 year ago for real and personal property was 99.45%. Pitt County Tax Administration continues to pursue all outstanding taxes using the necessary remedies made available through the North Carolina General Statutes. It's my recommendation for the board to approve the report as presented.
Move approved.
I second it.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor? Motion passes. Mr. Cream, looks like you're up again.
My next item for the board is the annual settlement of taxes for fiscal year 2021 through 2022. After July 1, 2022, and before being charged with taxes to collect during fiscal year 2022 through 2023, the tax collector is required to give a sworn statement to the Board of Commissioners as the annual settlement of taxes in accordance with the North Carolina General Statutes. List of unpaid accounts are available for public inspection at the tax office and with the clerk's office. It is my recommendation for the board to approve the annual settlement of taxes as presented.
I move for approval.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor? Motion passes. And we have a brief presentation from Madam Manager.
First and Corley.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Corley, jumping ahead.
I'll be brief, Chairman. Good evening. This is a report on a grant opportunity. This is for electric vehicle charging stations for the county. As part of the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality's Volkswagen Phase 2 Level 2 Workplace Program, there's monies that are available for the installation of electric vehicle Level 2 charging stations, which are not the quick chargers. These are Level 2s, so the ones that sit there. They're trying to promote employees to drive electric vehicles to work and use these charging stations. So as part of this, the maximum reimbursement is $3,000 or 60% of that cost. Since the publishing of this agenda item, I've also learned that GUC has a program for these that will also provide funding for this project as part of our source of funds, bringing the maximum amount that could be used by the county as to $6,000 from the $12,000 that's actually in your report. So this would put 2 stations here at the county office complex and 2 north of the river complex as well.
Where would it be? Here at the county office, and where would it be in north of the river?
It probably is going to depend on where the best place is to wire it and, to be cost effective as far as where
And it
to
will
bring
be
it. It'll have to come
publicized,
from the
won't it?
building. So we'll put it appropriately so that is as inexpensive as possible and
Thank
also
you.
provides a benefit to the employees that may use it. So tonight, asking for proceeding with these, the electric vehicle charging station grant application.
I move for approval.
I have a question. Who pays for the electricity that they use?
So since these are level 2, typically the installer pays for that because it is.
I'm talking about once it's installed.
Yeah, that's what, yes. So
Oh.
typically these don't, unless someone sits there, they slow charge really. In essence, it takes, I believe, 8 or 9 hours for a car to fully charge.
So you have 2 stations, but you got 12 people potentially looking for them. What happens when you get into argument?
Well, we may have to add more if we have that many vehicles that are looking for charging stations, I guess. They would be for employee use,
But
however
the
we can
employee
decide
doesn't
if
have, the
others-
employee doesn't have to pay for their car to get charged?
That's correct. Typically, the
Sound
only
like a
ones that
deal.
you have charge, you actually pay for are the ones that 20-minute charge, that really, there's not a lot of energy that's utilized with these as far as in the charge.
So is the county gonna subsidize everybody else that uses gas-driven cars? And if not, I wanna know why.
I understand.
How is this fair?
It's a program that the state has and just trying to promote employees to drive electric vehicles.
Yeah,
We thought it
well,
was-
what happens when, if everybody can switch over to electric cars right now, you would have to have an electrical grid more than double what it is now. Electric cars, believe it or not, use electricity. Who knew? Who knew?
It's not solar use?
Entertain a motion.
I say move.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor? Madam Manager.
Good smile.
Yes, a brief report. Your next meetings are August 8th and August 22nd at 6 p.m. in this room. Reminder of the National Association of Counties Conference, July 21st to 24th next week, and your North Carolina Association of County Commissioners Conference, August 11th to 13th next month. Do have an announcement with regard to the Deputy County Manager, Chief Financial Officer position. As you know, Brian Barnett is moving on, and his last day at work will be Friday. I have, if Sam and Russell will both come forward, I have named to the Deputy County Manager, Chief Financial Officer position, Mr. Sam Kroom. So I am thrilled that he will assume the position. He'll have a week to work together with Brian Barnett, and then we'll assume that position effective Monday, the 25th. I do believe he has the knowledge, ability, and demeanor to be very successful in this position.
And what was the other fellow's name?
And so with that, that creates a vacancy in the tax office. And the appointment of the tax administrator is a role for this board. I would be recommending to you that you appoint Russell Hill as the interim tax administrator, and that you authorize me to advertise internally for that position this Thursday.
You need us to make that motion right now, do so. That's my motion.
Second. It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor? Motion passes. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
It does take me a while to remember names. I wrote it down. I don't know whether they're gonna make any difference or not.
As required by law, whenever we settle a case, including workers' compensation matters, we must report those out at a public meeting. We have settled a case for Mr. Emmanuel Williams at $55,000 and a case for Joseph Falcone at $6,500. Wanted to remind folks about the 2022 NACO art competition. Let the board know that Commissioner Huggins did speak with NACO recently on a call about that art contest and our experience with it. If you came in the county office building this morning from the main entrance, if you looked above the water fountains, you'll see the winners, the 5 winners from last year in Pitt County, mounted on that wall with information about that contest. And this year, entries will be due in October. We have worked closely with the Pitt County schools and let them know about the contest. So we encourage the schools and students to participate in the I Love My County Because art contest. And then the last thing I wanted to make you aware of is Pitt County Press Pass. One thing that I've been pleased with is we've been very transparent and have had an open relationship with the media. And I credit in large part our public information officer, Dawn Jones, who has really facilitated timely and thorough communication and transparency. And so we have started a new program that will run quarterly. It will begin on August 1st, the next one October 10th and January 10th. And this will be time at the Agricultural Center Auditorium where we invite all media, TV and print, to what we're calling Pitt County Press Pass. We'll have department heads available quarterly. It'll be a floating event designed to give media partners interview opportunities with representatives from the county so they can ask questions and learn about some of the things we're doing. It'll be a floating event from 9:30 to 11, and we will provide donuts and coffee for members of the press. So just letting you know we're doing that to continue to strengthen our relationship with the press.
When was that again?
The next one, the first one, will be August 1st.
Okay.
From 9:30 to 11 in the Mark W. Owens Auditorium.
Thank you for the update. At this time,
Go into consent.
Second.
I was going to move that we approve the items for consent with the exception, do request that we remove item 7 solely for the reason to have some more communication with NCDOT regarding that abandonment. That'll be my motion.
is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor? Motion passes.
And if it is okay with you, Mr. Chairman, we'll obtain that additional information that Mr. Nunnally had asked me about and bring that back to your next meeting.
Thank you. And Ms. Gallagher, if you could lead the discussion on North of the River Community Center?
Yes, Commissioner Mary Perkins Williams approached me about her desire to see a community center north of the river. And as is with most projects, it needs to be, before we invest staff time in detailing it much further, we want to be sure that this is something that the entire board wants to do. So Mary has a vision of a community center that the county can use and that members of the public can use that will be located north of the river for items similar to the things you heard about in public addresses to the board this evening. It could be used potentially for DSS to have temporary setup for the LEAP, Low Energy Income Assistance Program, for example. It could be a vaccination site. It could be a place where North of the River Improvement Association or other organizations want to meet. It's in order to find an appropriate site, and what she's considering is an auditorium that may have some limited office space within it, it was important that we have a site that's served by sewer, and particularly on the bus line so that folks could get to it with ease. So we had considered as one particular option the site that would have been the within the county office park north of the river, where you may recall Trillium was going to put healing transitions, and that's no longer a project that's moving forward. So what Mary's asking the board to do today, if the board wants us to consider this further, to direct staff to explore options for a community center north of the river and bring back a report to the commissioners at a future meeting. And we can tie this in also, we have discussion coming forward on recreation. To the extent this building could have could be converted for use as a gymnasium within it, to maximize its use. To the extent it could be used for larger meetings, it would be, I'm anticipating, slightly larger than the Ag Center auditorium. So if this board would like us, like county staff, to explore this further, then you would just need to so direct.
Commissioner McMahon?
Yes, I think this is a great idea that we could at least pursue it and to have staff to look into the feasibility of this. So I think that's great.
Additionally, I think it's important too, for when we have floods, that the building can be used as a shelter rather than the schools, because with the last flooding we had, even though other places there wasn't any flooding, but the students was at Welcome Middle School. We were at Welcome Middle School as sheltered people, and school could have been in otherwise. So it's very important. We have a serious need over there as it relates to that. In addition to some of the things that you heard Mr. Little present in his presentation at the podium, and I won't even repeat all of them, and I'm going to spare you the sermon.
Commissioner Perkins Williams, is that a motion?
Yes.
Second.
It's been
Thank
moved
you.
and properly second. All those in favor of moving forward? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Mr. Burnett?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Board of Commissioners. During our budget discussions, one of the items that you wanted us to look into this fiscal year was to look at shift differential pay. It was brought forth to you by the Sheriff's Office, and as staff, we took that message from you, and we wanted to put together a little presentation just for discussion purposes to make sure you all understood differential pay, especially not just from the Sheriff's Office, but from the public safety standpoint. So first thing I want to do is just make sure you all understand some basic definitions. Shift differential pay is extra compensation for employees who work outside of your traditional day shift. For our purposes, we're looking at 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. is our traditional day shift. When you look at local government as a whole, some areas that have shift differential pay are law enforcement, folks in telecommunications, and employees in EMS. It is used as a tool to attract employees to work less desirable shifts, and wanted to be perfectly clear that shift differential pay is different than what we call on-call pay. Those are actually two different pay types. From our discussions internally as staff, this is not the first time that we looked at shift differential pay. This also came up in the 2022 budget process when Scott Elliott was still manager. This particular budget process that we just went through for 2023, this was an item that was requested by the Sheriff's Office, and at the time we decided not to include it within the recommended budget due to a lack of planning and implementation. We had the raw numbers, but we didn't have really the next steps forward. The manager did agree to take a look at this through the fiscal year. When we met back in March, we decided that just because it was cut didn't mean it was necessarily off the table, that this would be something that we could address during this 2023 fiscal year. And then obviously during the budget process, and we had our public hearing here in June, you all did ask us to go ahead and speed that process up, and that's where we are today. So what I wanted to show you, as you know, we love to compare ourselves. We have a group of counties that we consider to be our comparable counties, and also wanted you to look at what I call our proximity locations. So as you can see, when you look at our comparable counties, Catawba, Gaston, Iredell, and New Hanover do have some type of differential pay as an option for their employees. And then from a proximity standpoint, Lenoir County and East Carolina, when you look at their police department, also implement differential pay. When you look at our comparable counties that do not, Cabarrus and Davison do not have differential pay. And when you look at proximity, Beaufort, Martin, Craven, Greene, and Wilson counties do not have this. And even though this was put in the paper, the city of Greenville does not have shift differential pay as an option for their employees. So from a comparable standpoint, I want to just kind of give you a breakdown of what's out there. In Catawba County, they do $1 per hour if you work during the differential shift. Right now, it's only on their EMS staff, and their EMS staff is a permanent night shift as an option. In Gaston County, it's 50 cents per hour, and it is for their telecommunications and detention center staff. They too look at a permanent shift. New Hanover County does a 5% of their salaries for what they call for their 911 communications and their Port City United. If you're familiar with a 311 call center, this is where you're able to call in 311 and New Hanover County and get information. So that's the shift that they're looking at, and they also work a permanent shift. And then Iredell County they had to be the superstars of this. They actually break it down into 4 different categories, going from 25 cents, 50 cents, $1 to $2, depending on, they actually split their shifts. If you work second shift, once you cross over into that differential shift rate time period, you get the 25 cents. They have a peak shift, which is 50 cents. They do a half shift and a full shift, and then a half's $1 and $2. They do have this as an option for the sheriff's office, the detention center, EMS, and communications, and they have a combination of permanent shifts and rotating shifts. From proximity standpoint, Lenoir County does $1 per hour in their sheriff and detention office. They rotate shifts. And then East Carolina, as part of the state, they do 10% for anyone who works the night shift in the police department. So some things to consider as this conversation started, primarily from the sheriff's office. We as staff wanted you to understand that we do have other departments that do work at night. We are looking at the option of, do we continue to rotate shifts or do we have permanent shifts? There's obviously going to be some administrative changes in how we record this and how we pay for it. And as always, cost is always an option. And then always the status quo, keeping what we have in place without shift differential pay. So from a department standpoint, we thought it would be prudent to look at all of our departments that work outside of traditional shifts. So you have the sheriff's office, the detention center, EMS, and our communications folks also work at night. When you look at the permanent shifts, right now the sheriff's office and detention center do have rotating shifts, but I do know the sheriff's office is looking into having a permanent shift at the detention center. Communications right now does rotate shifts. If you didn't know, EMS, they work a 24-hour shift. And then Catawba, Gaston, New Hanover, and Iredell all have some type of permanent shifts in place with their folks who work shift differentials. They're obviously setting this up. That would be one of the challenges, but we think they're the option best would to do this very similar to how we do our own call pay. I'm not going to bore you with how our system works, but I think we can basically mirror that to be able to do this from an administrative standpoint. And then obviously we'd have to train our folks to make sure we capture the cost correctly. Obviously, if you worked it, we want to make sure you get paid. So I think with proper training, we can get our people ready and in place to do this if you all were to decide to move forward. From a cost standpoint, as you know, everything costs something. So there's basically 2 models to look at, as you've seen from our other locations. There's a percent of salary model, and there's a per hour model. In both scenarios, anytime you deal with salaries, you do have to take in consideration FICA, retirement, 401k expenses. So it's not just what you pay per hour, but you also have those additional expenses. So when you look at the percentage model, like I said, this is used by New Hanover County and East Carolina. It's a little more difficult than the drop-down model that I mentioned before that would mirror on-call pay. From a cost standpoint, just remember, if you do any type of market adjustment, COLA, or any type of merit pay, because you're basing your shift differential cost on an employee's salary. As that employee's salary goes up, so does the shift differential pay. This is the model that was brought forward by the Sheriff's Office during the budget process. They were looking at 10% for the eligible non-exempt employees in the Sheriff and Detention Center, and then a 5% for your exempt employees. These are your high-level supervisors. This would cover their costs if they have to come out during those night shift periods. The per dollar hour model, this is Catawba, Gaston, Iredell, and Lenore County. Again, this mirrors our own call pay. This is simply I don't want to say it's a fixed cost, but it's more of a flat cost, because you're essentially just taking the hours that are available, multiplying by an amount, and that cost stays pretty much flat throughout the fiscal years, even as those employee salaries increase. So from a sustainability standpoint, it's a little bit more fiscally in line than a percentage-based look at the cost. So just to give you some facts and figures, based on the percent model, when you look at what the Sheriff's Department proposed, when you look at the actual employees who would be eligible, and again, these numbers are going to be, this is a fluid, depending on employees' merit anniversary dates, this number could increase, but when you look at the Sheriff's Office, Detention Center, and your exempt employees, you're looking at about $745,000, so $250,000. If you look at the per hour model, again, you just look at the number of employees who could actually work those periods and be eligible. And if you would do and consider communications and EMS, you're looking at about $626,000. I didn't find a model that included exempt employees working the night shift, so I didn't include that cost, but in the future consideration, if you were to consider, then obviously you'd have to factor in, we'd have to factor in the number of those exempt employees who would be working at night to get what that number would look like. So based on what I've seen out there, as management staff, we are looking more at the per hour. Well, our recommendation, number one, whatever you do, create a written policy. That way everybody's covered going forward. We know exactly who's eligible and we know exactly how much we'd have to pay. Again, you could mirror it on our own call policy. We would like for you, if you're going to move forward on this, to consider the folks in EMS and 911 communications. So look at it more from a public safety standpoint as a whole, including the Sheriff's Office and Detention Center. We do think the per hour model is more sustainable fiscally. Like I said, that amount stays flat. It's cleaner to do. It records the actual hours worked. And that last bullet point, I think anything you all do is subject to funding. So if you get into a pinch a few years from now, this would be an area, just like your cost of living or your merit, that you may want to consider. If you had to, you could cut it. So as long as funding is available, the program would be in place. I do recommend, because we just started the new fiscal year, we haven't even touched the surface of our tax proceeds. We haven't even hit our discount date, that as you move forward in your discussions, that you at least wait until the 1st of January to implement this. Whichever direction you go, this will also give us time to make sure all of our folks are trained up and that our system can handle it. And it also would give some more time to talk if we are looking at doing permanent shifts. But I think waiting until January would assure you that you have the funds to actually be able to pay it if you were to implement it. So that being said, that's all I have, unless you guys have any questions.
That's a lot to be looking at and listening to as far as like making a decision. And I think that we need, during our budget time or whatever, we need some education into what it, actually means all down, all the way down, because it's a change, a big change from what we're doing now and have done in the past. So that's the only thing that I would say, that if we're going to consider it at all, that we either during one of our budget workshops or whatever, that we be schooled in this a little more thorough. I know I would like to be before I would vote on it one way or the other.
Commissioner Amending.
Thank you. So, in principle, I think regardless of how we go, it needs to be across all first responders, public safety. If we're gonna take this policy forward, in my view, it needs to be a holistic approach, you know, for our folks on the front line. So, with that being said, I would be opposed to doing something immediate. I'm kind of on the fence as to whether or not it's something that, as Commissioner Ward has suggested, something that consider as a regular budgetary process for next fiscal or January. I think a lot of that would depend on financial, how we're looking. One of the things I like about looking at January is it does give us some time to you know, no one wants to say we're going to do something and not do it, but if we did set it, it would at least give us some time if financial picture and outlook is not so great, that we could still make a fiscally sound decision to pull it if we needed to. So I'm on the fence as to whether or not to do it next fiscal or January 1, but I would not be in favor of doing it immediately.
My feeling is that this, you know, not doing it even in January, waiting until we're looking at the whole budget picture would be still my choice.
Commissioner Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, we consistently talk about us being the best in the East and the leader in the state. I think that we've heard the Sheriff Department and have members of the Sheriff Office talk about where we are standing in terms of pay. I think that we should move forward with this in terms of looking, you know, into the differential pay, and we should do it as soon as possible. But I want to be in consideration with our budget. But I think we certainly should move on this. This is I think, is an attraction for the best employees for the Sheriff Department, and we have to retain these employees. A lot of employees that I've talked to and I've seen, they're leaving the department and they're going to other locations and other departments, even out of the Sheriff Department to make a decent living. So I think that we should move forward, and as far as the timing is concerned, I certainly would consider what you're saying, Brian, that we will move it in a way that we can, our budget would allow this financial effort to take place. But I certainly think that we should try to move forward in this in an expeditious manner.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Second.
More discussion over here before you make a motion.
Commissioner Huggins.
As much as I appreciate the sheriff, all the deputies and all, I must think about budget. And I'm like Commissioner Ward, I don't see us making this big a move during not a budget time. And as you said, you get in a situation where we need to see what the tax is going to look like, that collection is going to look like, and to move forward with this at this particular time. I think we need more information on it, and I just don't. And if at all, you know, the first of the year. So that's my thinking of it.
The amount you're talking about, if we did it in January, would be half, is that right?
Theoretically, yes.
Theoretically.
The amount that we looked at was from a whole year standpoint when you look at it on a per hourly basis. So just so you guys know, the Sheriff's Office, EMS, and 911 all sent me the eligible employees, and we calculated it on an entire year. So yes, it would be, you'd be looking at half of the number.
And if we went forward with the idea that we would try to do this in January, we could still look at it again in November, and with a report from you whether we were in a position to go forward with it.
So
But we would be ready. I mean, I think that the planning that you're talking about, the paperwork, all of the procedures needs to be happening if we're going to go forward with it. And if we go, as Commissioner McLaurin suggests, moving towards January, it doesn't mean that we have to do it in January if we don't feel physically responsible.
I mean, I would tell you January, once you start a new fiscal year, is an easy, safe date. And obviously, you want to wait. I would tell you at least to wait till you got through your discount period on your tax collections before you, flip the switch on anything, involving personnel-related large numbers within a new fiscal year, just to make sure that everything is in line the first couple of months.
Yeah. And I think we
Mr.
need to
Chairman.
hear what that is gonna be. Before I would vote for something, I wanna know what that's gonna cost of taxpayer money.
Yeah, I mean, I think the
There's a
amount.
lot to me that it's something that we can't possibly do now, but I certainly think we need to be schooled in it so that we understand it better, so that we'll know how to move forward.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to get recognized before I do anything, and right now, I'm asking for clarification of the motion, because what I'm voting on is the motion. Is that right? So, Mr. Commissioner McLaurin, what was your motion and what did you second?
I move forward with the differential pay for the sheriff's department and the other department that was mentioned.
And in that, immediately.
Immediately,
Not
right.
drag it out. Because we can keep putting this off and putting this off. But I'd like to remind the board that back when we voted on our budget, we were going to look at this from an amendment to the budget. And it was a promise by this board unanimously that we would do that. So to put it off, I think would be bad, because we had already made that commitment. And we got numbers here. So if you cut it in half, call it $400,000 for this year. It's less than that, but because it's half the $750,000. So with the money we have, it's easily affordable at this time.
Commissioner Nunley.
Just want to clarify, moving forward immediately, but with an effective date of January 1st. Is that
Right,
correct?
that is
Commissioner
correct.
Blanca? Okay.
I'd like to call for question, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Huggins.
I heard yes, no,
You heard yes, no.
on immediate and,
So immediate action tonight to decide to do it, but with an effective date of January 1st.
Correct.
So kind of
Right.
That's what we're
That's what
saying.
we're saying.
And to come up with a plan that will be implemented.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right, that's what we're saying.
And whatever
what-
ordinance, not ordinance, but whatever policy we have to create, get that done as quickly as possible, bring it back before us, we bless it, give it the sign of cross or kill it.
Now, can I go back? Mr.
I'm
Chairman,
good.
I'd like to call for question.
I said I could.
My understanding is to then create the proposal. This is just to move forward with creating a proposal?
Well,
Because right now, we have multiple proposals and no direction to give.
Exactly.
Right.
well,
There's a
Finance
motion.
Department.
Well, Mr. Chairman, as Commissioner Colson said, we said as a board that we would do this. We said that. And I don't think we should stop messing around with, let's do it. Let's be the leader in the state. Let's be the best in the East. So I think we should move forward with it as already been outlined.
well, there's two proposals
Right,
that you
I
basically
think-
made. And one costs $750,000, one costs 600 and some thousand. I mean, the difference between is really not, to me, a big issue. We could settle on one or the other. I prefer the hourly rate, what I call the hourly rate, what was recommended by Brian.
I think if we're going to vote on that, we would need
Well,
clarification.
that's why they,
Right.
And that's what I'm asking.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Nunley.
So with Commissioner McLaurin's blessing, I would like to substitute motion to clarify that we move forward with approval of differential pay with staff recommendation affecting all departments mentioned, at the per hour rate, effective January 1st. Is that?
Well, Mr.
Well, that's what I think we intended.
What's it?
That's what we're saying.
Here's
that's-
where I'm getting confused, Mr. Chair. You called on me, and you recognized me, and I asked for clarification of this motion. Am I not correct? And I asked him what was his second, right? And we're still talking about it. Then I called for, since you had called on me, I called the question. A call for question is non-debatable.
Well,
You put the motion.
But
It is
before
if
you
we don't have
can
clarification on
exercise
the
call
actual
for
motion.
question, all members of the board must
Gotta
have an
understand.
opportunity to talk.
Okay.
Certain members have decided not to up to this point. Alex may want to say something, so it's improper for any one of us, I think, to call for question when certain members have not had their opportunity to speak.
And I had not had my opportunity to speak.
But you did speak. You did speak.
No.
My
Well,
thing of
Alex
it
did.
is,
No,
you
no.
either voted up, voted down, then you put another motion on. We don't have to consider two motions all the time.
Well, he
Let's
was trying-
vote one up and vote it down, then
No,
put
I
another
was-
one up there.
But I believe what he was doing is basically saying, okay, in our motion, we left it kind of open. It could be either or.
Mm-hmm.
And the chair has asked for us to be more specific,
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
okay? And
Now state your
And so-
motion.
he clarified his motion, and after I had said, I felt like the hourly rate would be the better way to go, or whatever's recommended by Brian. So whether or not the clarification that's being offered is necessary, I guess the rest of you have to decide.
I believe it would be necessary in the form of the motion,
Okay,
which I
in that
believe
case-
Commissioner Nunley has
Okay.
offered.
Can I second his motion too?
You can.
I'll second it then.
It has been moved and
Because
properly
Drive is saying-
second. All in favor?
We're voting on the substitute motion.
When I don't know what I am voting on, I don't vote. And I'm
Commissioner
clarified.
Perkins-Williams,
I mean, we
unless
got two
called
motions
upon-
on the floor, Mr. Chairman.
But his was a substitute motion,
Well, then let's
which is.
drop his
which is-
motion and vote on
No,
one
no, no,
motion.
no, no, the substitute motion goes first.
It
So
was-
what was your motion?
So my motion was.
I want to understand, that's all. What was
Mr.
your
Chair,
motion? Am
may
I
I
not?
explain my motion, Mr. Chair?
Please do.
Thank you.
So my motion was merely meant as a substitute to clarify and solidify the motion of Commissioner McGlawhorn, that we move forward with the differential pay as advised and recommended by staff, that we make the effective date January 1st, and we adopt the hourly rate mechanism, and that we would attach this not just to the sheriff's department, but to detention center, EMS, 911, our first responders.
And
Just
you
to
stayed in the
clarify.
motion, okay.
Yeah.
So you chaired.
That's.
It's been moved and properly second. Everyone voted in
And we've
favor
already
except for
voted.
Commissioner Perkins-Williams. Are you sticking with that position, or would you like to vote in favor?
We've already voted in
Are you
favor.
for
Yeah,
or
we've
against?
already,
Am I for?
Commissioner
His
Nunley's
motion.
motion.
Yes.
Okay, that's all I need to know. I'm for
Motion
that.
passes unanimously.
Bear in mind that both of us voted for his substitute.
But that's what I'm trying to say, when you got two motions on, you didn't even know what, I just wanted the chair to
Croom.
state the motion. If he had stated, that's all it needed. I didn't know. Somebody sitting out there going on.
Good evening again, Chairman Fitzpatrick, Commissioners, Manager Gallagher. Tonight I bring you an order of collection to the Pitt County Tax Collector for fiscal year 2022 through 2023. The Board of Commissioners shall issue an order of collection to the tax collector for fiscal year 2022-2023 in accordance with the North Carolina General Statute 105-321. I recommend the board to approve and sign the order of collection for the fiscal year 2022 through 2023.
I so move.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor? Motion passes.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and board members. For your consideration, we're requesting a change to the personal ordinance, 2 sections to be amended. One is our holiday section, Section 109, and with that section, we'd like to include the Juneteenth holiday to be celebrated and as a paid day off for employees, along with the other holidays on the state approved list. The second change we're requesting is Section 111, which was previously currently called parental involvement in school activities, which allowed employees to take time off, but it had to be their time off. It was not paid leave time to attend activities at a child's school. We'd like to include it now to be called community service and parental activity leave, which will allow employees to have 8 hours of paid time off to either go participate in community volunteer activities with a nonprofit or governmental agency, or to attend activities at their child's school, and that would be 8 hours of paid leave.
8 hours for a year.
Per calendar year.
Okay.
Not cumulative, so it's 8 hours
Right.
per calendar year.
And then it would re-up the next year.
Yes, ma'am.
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Well, I was gonna ask a question, but I vote against it because I didn't get to answer the question.
Mr. Burnett?
I think this is what I'm gonna miss the most.
Okay,
But you know what to do, don't you? All right.
Mr.
Talk
Burnett, if
you
we could
will.
back up. Sure. Since the
Since the
Motion.
personnel ordinance amendment was not unanimous, it will need a second reading. If we can bring it back next meeting, or, Mr. Chairman, you could entertain Mr. Colson's question to determine.
And I would like, when it comes back, I would like to know what the cost of this is. If we are so concerned about differential pay, then what is the cost of doing this?
There's
I'd
no-
like to also know how many vacation days, not vacation, but how many paid holidays the county has, and this adds to it one more. So there's a cost of lost production there. There's a cost of the 8 hours. I'm not necessarily against it, but I'd like to know what that number is.
And I could answer those questions. We currently have 12 paid holidays. This would make 13. And it would not cost you any additional money than has been budgeted. We budget for the full year. So there would be a neutral financial impact because it would be a paid vacation day. That day is already within the budget.
But theoretically, you're losing productivity.
Or increasing productivity if you find it
Well,
makes a
maybe.
happier workforce.
Maybe. Don't forget, 13's an unlucky number, so maybe you need to add another holiday.
Please, please.
Oh, we are
Please.
good tonight. We
We've
have
already
excellent
voted on
board.
Does that satisfy you?
Let's go on.
Does that
Does
That does not
satisfy?
make me change my vote, no.
Okay.
And we've
Fair
already
enough.
Because
voted.
I don't see numbers, the cost of it. I want it projected the way I look at it as a manager of a company. I look at that as you're losing the potential productivity. When you got all that, and then many people have 3 weeks of vacation, you add it all together, I mean, that's a lot of time off and a lot of options for the employees. So just throw one more out there. I would like to see the cost.
So I'm bringing for you tonight, this is long-awaited American Rescue Plan policies, as we had our last big discussion on this back in February when we had our workshop. Been working with our county attorney. The School of Government in Chapel Hill has given us a lot of examples. So these are the policies that the U.S. Treasury would like to see us have in place to make sure that we are in compliance with all the rules and regulations. There are 8. We have a non-discrimination policy, a records retention policy, a program income policy, a conflict of influence policy, subaward and monitoring policy, allowable cost and cost principal policy, property management policy, and an eligible project policy. This is over 100-some pages. I'm not going to go over them tonight. It's a lot to digest. But in reviewing these with our county attorney, we feel that this is appropriate for us to move forward with our American Rescue Plan process. You don't have, as part of your policies, the actual application that the county and any outside group would have to fill out for each project to make sure we are in compliance. It's not something you have to approve, but I would tell you that approving this tonight really starts your process to solicit projects from the community. I just want to point out, since I won't be here, on the program income, any money that's made off of any projects that you all approve, that money must be pumped back into ARP-related expenses. On the subaward and monitoring policy, any money that we give to a particular group for them to carry out a function, we have to monitor that group to make sure they are in compliance. What we approve as policies, they need to have. So that may make it difficult for some of our smaller groups to be able to be actual eligible. I will tell you to keep a close eye on that, because that can trip up any money that you give them. If it doesn't meet the policy, you're on the hook for paying. And then allowable costs, just make sure everything that you do approve is an allowable cost within ARP. So again, 2 or 3 years down the road, you're not looking to repay back any particular project.
Commissioner Nunley?
Motion to approve all of those suggested
Second.
policies.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor?
And that Melvin, I don't know where, Melvin, we're voting. Okay.
Motion passes.
And then in a similar vein, one of the things we wanted to look at as staff, as the COVID-19 situation, as you saw the information from Dr. Silvernail, obviously it's still ongoing, but it's not where it was in the past when the different variants came into place. You all did put into place a policy using our American Rescue Plan funds that would allow us to incentivize employees to get vaccinated. You did this back last August or September timeframe. Back in February, you decided that employees no longer needed to do the weekly testing if they were not vaccinated, but you decided to keep in place the incentive payments and the incentive hours, whichever the employee chose who could verify they've been vaccinated. Since February, we have looked at this policy and determined that primarily we are paying out new employees who have received their full vaccination prior to employment. And due to the decline in COVID numbers, we would like to go ahead and sunset that particular policy so that we could shift that ARP funds to other projects that you may have. And in the other part of this also, as part of our COVID policy, we did allow some flexibility in our ability to telework. And we'd also like to see that sunset to go back to our more traditional policies that we have in place for work time.
I may just add to that, that the governor's state of emergency is also slated to sunset in August. And so your timing of sunsetting these policies is consistent with the governor's action as well.
Commissioner Nunley?
Motion to sunset.
I second. That's what we're good. That is clear.
Motion has been moved and properly second. All those in favor? Motion passes. Mr. Gentry?
Good evening, Chairman Fitzpatrick and Commissioners. Thank you for your time. Let me get this fired up. Okay, I'm going to be brief. This past February, I came before you and asked for some ARPA money to purchase some ambulances that we desperately need in our system and 2 QRVs, quick response vehicles. And we have diligently tried to place those orders, but as you all are aware, we are in uncharted times. And with the moving target of materials and pricing, we were unable to place that order until the manufacturer would receive that order. And they were going through their pricing structure. We thought we were getting close to that, and I came back in May to get permission to spend that money that was approved back in February. And when I notified the manufacturer, they gave me a date of June 1st before they would have their new pricing schedules designed to give me a price for a truck. On June 10th, I received a price, or a not to exceed price of so we wanted to move forward. But in that discussion, in my department and with county leadership, we determined that because of the uncertainty and the when we might receive new ambulances and QRVs, I don't know when they'll come in. Feel like it's really a good ask that we ask for an additional 4 trucks and 1 more QRV. We lost a QRV a couple of months back in a motor vehicle accident. and we need to replace that. There's also some capital needs that I need in next year's budget. I came before the board, I think a year ago, and just made you aware that we have some end-of-life equipment that I will be asking for in the future, where the future is coming quickly, which is the heart monitors that all of the rescue squads in Pitt County use, with the exception of Greenville. The contracted squads, we provide those. We have end-of-life stretchers that we provide to all of the squads, as well as our county-run squads. So my ask is for those additional equipment, additional monies. Just to kind of give you an idea, last September you approved the purchase in that year's budget, the previous year's budget, and it was 180 days to receive an ambulance. I still have not received those trucks that I ordered in September. I was talking with the vendor today, and I'm hoping to have those in Pitt County the first week in August. When I asked the question if I ordered more trucks, the anticipated delivery is over a year. So I'm not asking for extra, I'm asking to pre-order next year's budget, budgeted items of ambulances and some end-of-life equipment that all of our squads need, whether it be a contracted squad or a county squad. They were all purchased at the same time, so they reached end-of-life at the same time. So been in a lot of conversation with county leadership about this request, and I ask that you provide the additional dollars. You approved $1.2 million back in February. I'm asking for $3.5 million total to include that 1.2 to go ahead and place these orders, understanding that I won't receive them this year, but I can't order them or issue a PO until I have the dollars in the bank. So that is my request.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner
I move
Huggins.
to approve.
Second. Any further discussion? It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor? Motion passes.
And thank you for your shift differential to affect the 911 and the EMS workers. I really appreciate that and all of your support for our department. Thank you.
Madam Manager?
Yes, you're due for a reappointment to the Animal Services Advisory Board. Charlotte Ann Alexander is eligible and would like to be reappointed if the board would so move.
Motion to approve. Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor? Motion passes. Commissioner Ward?
No comment.
Commissioner Huggins?
Well, I just want to say I really appreciate the effort of the manager and staff of putting the winners of the art competition artwork in the lobby of this building. And I encourage and ask students to participate in this year's art competition. I hope we will have more than we had last year. We had, I believe, 5 winners last year and 1 honorable mention. I hope we'll have more with the coming year.
Mr. Grasser? Commissioner Nunley?
Yes, so wanted to give a brief shout to the coming softball Little League World Series to our community. A very exciting event. Happy to have the best under 12-year-old players in the world. We have 4 international members coming this year, so it's very exciting. And Pitt County will be represented after winning the state tournament. So very excited to have international level quality softball, as we know we have already in this community, but it'll be here for Little League World Series. So come out. The CVB is actively involved. It's a really huge economic boost for our community when we host events like this. So please come out, and the cost is the best in town. It's free. So.
Commissioner Perkins-Williams?
Thank you. I have a comment. I'd like to thank the residents for all that they do to assist the county and their patience with us as a board, and what they're doing to help us grow and do better things for them. To further our efforts toward a higher plateau for Pitt County, I am asking that the Pitt County officials, to look into mechanism for changing at least some of our COG resources that comes from Rivers East to a COG in eastern North Carolina. Just look into changes from Mideast Commission, some of them, to eastern North, a COG in eastern North Carolina. Did you understand what I said? Was I clear?
Mm-hmm.
I would like to ask the officials of Pitt County to look into changing what the resources that we come through our COG was Mideast. It's no longer Mideast. It's now called Rivers East. And I'd like for them to look into a COG in eastern North Carolina. As you know, some of the funds that we receive through our COG has been sent back more than once. And so it's about time that we look into that, because we have areas that have need for those funds.
Oh.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to make that a motion.
I don't understand.
Is that appropriate?
Can make it.
To look into or investigate how we can change some of the COGS, the funds that come through a COG that we have now to, like Mideast. It's no longer Mideast, y'all know it as Mideast. It's called Rivers East, to other COG. Not the total thing, but portions of it may be, or best way that we can retain the funds that we need for Pitt County here in Pitt County, especially with the WIOA. I make a motion for that. So the money that's going back, we want to keep it in Pitt County. We at least should look at it. That's what I'm saying. Nobody seconded?
Hearing no second, motion fails. Commissioner McLaughlin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly just want to thank the board for moving forward with the differential pay for our sheriff's department and other EMS and other related departments for the county. I still believe that we are the best in the East and a leader in the state, and I think that this tonight certainly proved that moving forward. Thank you.
Commissioner Close.
I would like to draw the attention of the board to the fact a couple of days ago there was a mass shooting in Indiana, and it had 3 dead people, and there certainly would have been a lot more except for one thing. An authorized, licensed, concealed carry permit holder that was 22 years old who was carrying his gun pulled it and shot the guy. That made it 4 dead. So when we changed the Ordinance 4 to do away with the ordinance that we had created several years before, where not one incident had occurred, not one. Not one person spoke up from the community in favor of that change. And yet, we as a board of commissioners decided to do away with something. We are making it more difficult for incidents like that to happen, where somebody that will step forward and put their life on the line to stop some crazy nut. I think it was improper that we did, and it doesn't make the community safer. And what was really surprising about this is while this happens literally thousands of times across the country, you rarely ever hear about it because the national media doesn't talk about it, but they did this time. They actually brought this up and have mentioned it several times. Imagine that. Somebody that was willing to risk their life to protect other people. How many more people would have been dead had he not done so?
Well, we're losing money and sending it back to other places that we don't keep here in Pitt County, more than $300,000. So, you know,
I actually, I know what you're talking about.
This time I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and properly second. All those in favor?
Look at it.